Hello and welcome everybody. We are kicking off our Wellness Revolution series today, and I am so incredibly blessed and grateful to be inviting Dr. Nikola on my Wellness Revolution series today. She is absolutely incredible, world-renowned author, speaker. You guys, she's absolutely incredible. So here she is. I'm going to bring her on. See if we can do this without any mishaps. We did it. Hey. Oh my gosh. Welcome, Dr. Nikola. We're so blessed and grateful to have you on camera with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Jenny.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for being my guest. And you guys, like I said, we're kicking off this Wellness Revolution series. There is no better person to be sharing some really, really crucial information. We're going to be covering the topics today of inflammation, oxidative stress, opening up the detox pathway, and methylation. The great thing is that Dr. Nikola and I are going to be planning another live to get into more specifics, but thank you so much for being on with me today. And will you just give us a background? I didn't get a chance to do it before I added you on here, but will you just tell us just all that you've been able to accomplish and really where your passion lies?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. So yeah, I mean, I was always sort of passionate about health and fitness. I grew up in Australia with a very healthy Aussie mum who used to, we were allowed to go to McDonald's twice a year, and that was a big treat. And, so I always had that background. And then I started working in the fitness industry when I was in my late teens, and that grew into studying nutrition. And then that grew into studying in Australia, naturopathy, like traditional naturopathy. And then I moved to the States, and I realized if I wanted to practice here and live here and make my life here, which I did, I had to really kind of go back to school and get the sort of American qualification. So off I went to Bastyr in Seattle, did 4 years there and got my doctorate in naturopathic medicine, and then moved to San Diego in 2003 and started working mostly with autism. I was very, very blessed to join a practice with a great autism doc, and he trained me and got me connected into some patient clinics and things like that. And so that was really great. And I loved it. I loved working with the kids. And I'm excited to talk more about kids and autism and stuff with you another day.
Yes,
but then it sort of morphed into working with Lyme. And it started out because some of the mums of the kids would come see me and say, I'm exhausted. Everything hurts. I can't think straight. At first I thought it was just new mom stuff, but now, this is ridiculous. My kids are like 8. And so I would do the sort of functional workup and look at adrenals and heavy metals and, all different kind of elements. But Lyme was one of them. And it kept coming up again and again. And
wow.
So I started working more with the naturopathic elements of Lyme, and I'd refer out for antibiotics or anything more sort of Western med. And then over the years, I sort of just was able to integrate both. And so that's sort of 90% of my practice now is Lyme. 10% are probably still kids, autism. I see some PANS and PANDAS. And yeah, I mean, my passion is really helping people who aren't getting helped anywhere else. A lot of my patients have really sad stories of horrible treatment by the medical establishment and years of not getting diagnosed and being laughed out of doctors' offices and told it was all in their head and they're just anxious and take an antidepressant. And, it's just not a good thing. So my great love, other than just helping people fulfill their best health, is to be there as a support and to listen and to really hear them and kind of meet them where they're at.
Well, your heart shines through in everything you do. Your talks are incredible. We'll be posting, you guys, Dr. Nikola's link to her practice in San Diego and a lot of her talks. You've written 4 books online.
Yep.
And you basically travel the country. You go to Australia often. You said Australia is now a huge epidemic of Lyme. Will you just kind of talk a little bit about your 4 books before we get into the details here?
Yeah, so the first one's called The Lyme Diet, and that's probably still my favorite and the most successful, actually, 10 years later. Started out as a patient handout sitting at my mum's breakfast table in Sydney and just kind of grew from there. But, diet is such a crucial piece. So that has just, been really fulfilling that's helped so many people. And then I wrote the Beginner's Guide for Lyme disease. There's this sort of, when people first get diagnosed, and understandably, there's this huge deer in the headlights look like, oh my gosh, well, I'm sort of relieved to have a diagnosis. but what the heck happens next? And so there's so much complexity to Lyme. The beginner's guide to Lyme was really just to kind of break it down for people.
Wow.
And Lyme disease in Australia was kind of an offshoot of that, but I wanted to bring in some of the research, the evidence of Lyme actually in Australia, and just make it more tailored to them. And then my last book was Lyme Brain, which was all the sort of neuropsych cognitive elements of Lyme. And then I actually created an online course called Lyme Ed. And there's a patient version of Lyme Ed, and then there's a practitioner training version of Lyme Ed.
Wow.
Because we need more Lyme literate practitioners.
Absolutely. There's a huge need for it. And you guys, drop us a line. Let us know where you're coming in from. I know Dr. Nikola is going to want to connect with each and every one of you. One of the things I want to mention to you guys now is that we want to actually invite you. We're going to talk kind of general solutions, but we want to invite you to a private education group where you can learn and connect with Dr. Nikola there. So if you want to be added into that group, just drop a comment below, add me, and we'll be happy to do that. We'll get into more specifics there. But to talk about, just kick off our live today, Dr. Nikola, let's talk about oxidative stress and inflammation. We know that inflammation is linked to many of the issues we've been talking about already, but will you just give an overview as to how imperative it is to reduce inflammation in the body?
Oh, it's key. And, so when we talk about Lyme disease, we think of it as like a chronic infectious process. And this is what I say, we see a lot of mold toxicity. We see a lot of people with diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia. I mean, really, whatever the chronic health issue, there is such a strong root of inflammation going on. And so one of the things that happens when we treat Lyme too is it actually kicks up more inflammation through the process of treating it. So many of these chronic illnesses and chronic pain syndromes, inflammation is really at the root of that. And there's a lot of oxidative stress. Now, oxidative stress means free radical damage. And, part of that is a natural occurrence. Metabolism naturally creates some oxidative stress. But I think the bigger problem these days is there are so many toxins. The bodies are just getting bombarded. Even things I consider EMFs a toxin. Heavy metals, just so many different things. I've just been talking to people about mold toxicity and why all of a sudden there's such high levels of sensitivity with molds and mycotoxin illness, and that ties into chronic Lyme and some of these other things. So, I mean, what we have to look at is what's the root of the problem. And so, I mean, yes, I treat Lyme disease, and yes, I factor in sort of antimicrobial therapy. We want to kill the bugs, of course we do. But I'm really starting to realize the central role of inflammation and toxicity as a common thread in all these chronic illnesses, whether, the level of autoimmune is skyrocketing, the level of Lyme disease is skyrocketing, mycotoxin illness skyrocketing, autism skyrocketing. I mean, why is this happening? And I think it's because at a cellular level, our cells are getting damaged. We're not getting nutrition from food that we need to be getting. Even if we eat sort of organic fruits and vegetables and everything else, it's just not the way it used to be in terms of minerals and trace elements and things that we need to have our cells function well. So I think, a good amount of, regardless of the diagnosis, a good amount has to be going back to the basics of like, how can we get our cells working well? How can we regenerate the mitochondria? How can we counter some of the damage from infection, but also from toxins in the environment? And even an autoimmune. I mean, an autoimmune disease is really the immune system attacking one's own body, which also flares up inflammation. So I think we need to look back at that basic cellular level of how do we get inflammation down? How do we get toxins out? And then, that then helps the body to be able to heal.
Absolutely. So when we're talking inflammation and oxidative stress and reducing that inflammation, of course, what intrigued me was when you said that when you're killing off Lyme, it creates more inflammation. I'd like to move inflammation over into the detox pathway and kind of like, how do we bring this full round and healing the body on a cellular level? But will you explain the imperative part of not only reducing inflammation, but detoxing the body, opening up the detox pathway? I know many people are probably confused about how that's linked together, but how does that link together for you when you're treating your patients?
Well, they're just things that are going on sort of concurrently, and that we have to be trying to manage both things as best as possible. I mean, certainly, and you know, a lot of inflammation. This is why we talk about gut health and nutrition and things like that. And I know, Jenny, we're maybe going to tackle that one a different day. But I mean, a lot of, if there's inflammation in the gut, that can go up to the brain. The cytokines, which are chemical mediators of inflammation, cross the blood-brain barrier. So people are walking around with brain fog and can't remember anything, and sort of feeling just woozy and out of it, and like they don't belong in the world anymore, or they're not part of the world anymore. That a lot of that is the cytokines and those chemical mediators of inflammation.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, detoxification they're related. They're not the exact same thing, but they're all related as we're all interconnected in our bodies. But a lot of people, part of their illness is related to toxins and not being able to clear toxins from the body. And certainly like mycotoxin illness, that's for sure. There's a phrase that we use in Lyme treatment. It's not exclusive to Lyme, but we use called the Herxheimer reaction, which means when you kill off bacteria and you're doing treatment, no matter if it's ozone or rife or vitamin C or hardcore antibiotics, when you kill off pathogens, there's also a toxin release in that. And so the first thing I do with my patients is get them on detox regimens, like get them detoxing, whatever they can do, things they can do at home, infrared saunas, Epsom salts baths, coffee enemas, whatever the case may be, detox, detox, detox. Right. And the more I work with these chronically ill patients that have multiple things going on, they're like, well, how am I going to treat the mold and the Lyme and the this and the that? Or people who have more of a general diagnosis of like chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia. What does that actually mean? Like it doesn't explain what the underlying cause of illness is. It's a descriptor, and that can be helpful for people, but it's just a term that describes a set of symptoms.
Absolutely.
So the toxicity element is central to all of those things.
Absolutely. So we're talking about doom and gloom and inflammation and detoxing and all these toxins and bacteria. Let's talk solutions. You and I both have been educated about a breakthrough science called NRF2, NRF1 technology. It's very, very new. We're actually pioneering this information to the world. Like I said, guys, if you want more information on this specific science, please comment, add me below. If you're sharing this video, tag somebody, have them add them into this specific group. It'll give more specific details. But can you explain a little bit as to how this is imperative to combat inflammation and oxidative stress, reducing that inflammation, healing the gut, and then, you know, of course, just being able to get back to normal on a cellular level. Can you explain that through the pathways?
I mean, I've really realized, and, you know, I've heard that sort of term activation versus supplementation. And, you know, I'm not black and white on anything. I do use supplements. I do use medication. I do use antibiotics. So there's different times and places for everything. And those decisions for me as a doctor are made very individually for the person who's sitting in front of me. But again, going back to the fundamentals, we need to get those cells functioning more healthily on their own accord. And so that's what the NRF2 is doing for me. And there's very few things that I have found that do so much with such a sort of minimal intervention. You know, it's like, so when I think of the NRF2, I think of reducing oxidative stress. Like that's one of the big things, because that will of course help manage inflammation and get the inflammation levels down. The other thing I love is it then naturally boosts glutathione production. And I've got a great love affair with glutathione. It's one of, like, to me, one of the most important substances in the body, and it's our key antioxidant. And so if we can use the NRF2 activators to boost natural glutathione production, open up detox pathways. And what I really love is it helps with the genetic expression. So we hear so much now about MTHFR or methylation defects and SNPs and this and that. And people are supplementing with methylfolate or methyl B12, methylated, you know, trimethylglycine. And I'm not saying that those things are bad, but we have tons of these genetic SNPs in our body. That's so much more than just methylation, although methylation is a big one. And that can really hamper how we can detoxify. So again, with the NRF2 activator, being able to help genetic expression. So, you know, the genes themselves may be the same, but how they're expressed, we can influence by our diet, by our lifestyle, by, you know, what things we put in. And so there's some of the really key features for me. And then what I love about the NRF1 is the mitochondrial repair. I mean, we know in chronic illness, the mitochondria just get really wiped out. And, you know, so having that NRF1 to help repair the mitochondria is a really good adjunct. And it just gets all the cells working better. So, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely, you know, I'm a big fan. I'm taking them myself, even though I'm a pretty healthy person, because that gives me the best chance of aging well and preventing chronic illness and helping my body to cope with, you know, our Western world. So it's so nice that the NRF2 activator has such widespread actions.
Absolutely. Well, I know that I've heard in the naturopathic community that treating people with chronic diseases, there's so many things that, you know, technically can help, but it's if you can get to the symptom and activate the body to repair itself and to heal on a cellular level, that's where the beauty is happening. And now the conversation within epigenetics and how gene expression affects inflammation and all of that, that's what people and what researchers are talking and discovering, that if you can, like you said, influence your DNA in a positive way, you know, up and down regulating genes for inflammation and fibrosis, that's really where the healing starts. And so it's pretty incredible that, you know, we know about this breakthrough science. We know that it's going to be helping people and really just doing an incredible job of giving them one up and just on the way to healing, which I think is so many people need. And instead of masking a symptom with a pharmaceutical, which is having more of an adverse side effect, we're actually looking at the root cause of disease. And this is what I love so much, Dr. Nikola. And can we talk a little bit about gut health? I know this is a different topic, you know, going a little bit away from NRF1, NRF2 activation. And will you just explain the importance of gut health as related to the brain and how this affects chronic inflammation?
Yeah, so like I said before, I mean, inflammation in the gut will travel to the brain. So whenever there's anything going on in the gut that is putting it out of whack, so that could be somebody eating gluten when they're gluten intolerant, or, you know, any kind of food sensitivities, that somebody's eating a food that causes an immune reaction. So we have a lot of different things, you know, candida overgrowth, intestinal parasites, you know, the gluten problem. I mean, there's so many different things in the gut. And gluten, just a note about gluten, is it increases production of zonulin. And zonulin is a substance in the body that can increase the leakiness of the gut. We've all heard that leaky gut sort of term. So that's one of the reasons, just one of many reasons not to eat gluten. But so then we get this leaky gut situation, and then food molecules get through the leaky gut and trigger an immune response, because the immune system is trained that a single amino acid in the blood is fine, but a chunk of protein, for want of a better word, is not fine. So the immune system goes on attack, which naturally causes inflammation, which then can travel through the bloodstream. Those cytokines and things I mentioned before travel through the bloodstream, can cross the blood-brain barrier, and, you know, and cause inflammation in the brain. I call it fireworks in the brain. So that contributes to the brain fog and the memory loss and the anxiety and the depression and all these different things that are so common in chronic illness. So, I mean, really looking at gut health and looking at sort of individual food sensitivities, considering getting gluten out of the diet, making sure candida is not out of balance, because that's a really common thing, all have a really positive impact on reducing inflammation.
Absolutely. Well, you guys, I just want to thank Dr. Nikola for being on with me today. You know, we've had a great time. Like I said, we'd love to add you to a private education group where we can connect further, give you more specific information on this incredible breakthrough science that we're talking about today. But Dr. Nikola, would you just leave us with one last thought or idea? I know that your passion is just to empower people with their health. Your heart is just where, you know, you just not only treat people, you use your heart when doing it, because I see that you have such a love for people, and I appreciate that for you. I think our entire medical system would be in such a better place if we had more practitioners like you. It's truly, it gives me hope for those that are struggling. So can you just leave us with one last word of advice, or however you want to leave us today. I know everybody's just holding on to every word of yours.
You know, I think my encouragement would be, you know, if you're watching this and you've been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia, or you're suffering with one of these sort of invisible illnesses and you haven't got answers yet, you know, keep looking, keep working, and work with your nutrition and work with these kinds of technologies to get your cells working better. But also, I mean, I would encourage you to try and get to a functional medicine doc who can evaluate some of the other stressors on the body that may be an underlying cause. So I always encourage people, like, keep going until you get to the bottom line, the underlying cause. And when doctors say we don't know what's wrong with you and you're all fine because your blood work looks good, but you know you're hurting 24/7 and can barely get out of bed, don't believe them. You know what's up.
Absolutely. I always like to say, and you know, going back to this Wellness Revolution series, educate before you participate. Knowledge is power. When you're understanding the power of the human body and the power that, you know, God's given ability for our body to heal on its own, and just how much you can do to benefit that, and really to make sure that we're educating our children, we're educating ourselves on nutrition and wellness. And I know that if this is the first time someone's hearing about this information, it can be a little overwhelming. Maybe they're not used to eating healthy, but I always like to say one small step at a time, and educating, and before you know it, your family is on, you know, they're going to be well, and it's going to be a generational thing. So I just want to thank you, Dr. Nikola, and she is going to be posting her link to her practice in San Diego. I know that there's a lot of local people to California jumping on. I suggest go see her. She's incredible. So thanks again, doctor. And we just are so thankful that you took time out. And like we said, guys, our next topic is going to be autism. We're going to be discussing autism pretty in depth alone. We didn't want to cover it today because there's so much on the spectrum, but we'll be discussing that in our next live video. So make sure you stay tuned to that. And thanks again, guys. So thanks for tuning in. And
thanks, everyone.
It was great connecting. Bye, guys.
Bye.